Hello, I'm going to do a video today about mental health awareness. I do have notes. I do that for most of my videos because otherwise it'll just be a big jumbled mess. Because my mind's so active and so, I would say all over the place. My mind's so hyperactive sometimes that if I don't make notes, then what comes out of my mouth is just jumbled bullcrap. Right, so this month, as well as it being EDS Awareness Month, is also Mental Illness Awareness Month. Two things I suffer from. So, I've already done my EDS Awareness Month video, which is actually a tutorial on a zebra-esque look. It's not brilliant, but it's not that bad either. Not that bad considering it's me. My head probably feel different if I had a high resolution camera recording it. That might be a bit different because, yeah. Anyway, I do have some notes here. They're not that in depth and they're not that detailed, so it does give me a chance to actually be a bit more organic. I am trying to make some of these videos more organic rather than rehearsed or scripted, because they're not rehearsed or scripted. This is essentially what my notes look like. So they're not scripted, it's just bullet points. But yeah, if I'm looking down, it's because I'm looking down at my notes, so don't worry. I have suffered from depression for probably as long as I can remember. There's only ever been a few times in my life where I have not felt sad for whatever reason. I'm not sure what the origins of it, whether it's just something that's biochemical or whether it's something deeper, I don't know. I have had counselling and that has opened a few doors, but because there's something stopping me opening the doors completely, I can't figure out whether that's the source of the depression or not. But I was actually diagnosed in 2009, shortly after my EDS kicked off. I'll leave that video above the trigger events in EDS, because although EDS is something I've had all my life, there was a trigger event that happened in 2009 that caused it to get 100 times worse. It might go 1,000 times worse, probably by the time I'm in a wheelchair it'll get to that point, but it's not that much. It's not, the symptoms are things that I can sort of control, so with medication, but I can't control them completely because my body literally won't let me. So now, this is something that a handful of people do know. My mum knows, a lot of my friends know. I don't think much of my husband's side of the family know. But there was one night, I think EDS had kicked off probably 3 or 4 months before, and I was close to ending it. And my now husband was texting me. We were friends leading up to something at this point, and he didn't like the way I was sounding in my texts. So what he did is he rang me up and he said, "I don't like the way you sound. Are you alright?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." He's like, "Well, so," and then he stopped me from doing something that I probably would have regretted, because it wasn't a plea for attention. It wasn't anything like that. It was, I was sick of the pain, both the emotional and the physical pain. It's one of those things that I now know part of the reason behind it. Part of the reason behind it is because it's genetic. Part of the reason behind it is stuff that my brain still won't let me fully go into, that I haven't got. Well, I've got an idea, but I'm not 100% clear on it. I have family history of depression. My mother has been when I was a teenager, and is now being treated for depression. So there is a family history of it. My mum also suffered from an eating disorder just after I was born. So there's lots of things going on. Because there's a family history of eating disorders, I have to be careful not to fall into the eating disorder rabbit hole, because there is a family history of it, and I've had conversations with people, and I've got this thing about weighing myself, and they say, well, why don't you weigh yourself? Why do you go off the way your clothes fit? I said, because if I have a set of scales and I start weighing myself, I will get paranoid, and that would lead down a rabbit hole I don't want to go down. My mum doesn't own a set of scales for the exact same reason. Because we have a family history of it, because my mum has a history of it, we try and stay away from it as much as we possibly can. So having weighing scales is probably not the best idea for me. I don't have any in the house. I refuse to have them in the house. I can't stand them. I know lots of people with issues with mental health, and I try to be there for them all. And I love and respect the experience that they go through. A lot of people I have in my life have had some form of mental illness. Obviously, I'm not going to go into specifics in any way, shape, size, or form. But it's one of those things that even if I have depression and one of my friends has depression, our depression and the reasons behind it may differ. The intensity may differ. Some of the triggers that make it worse may differ. So I try and be there for them as much as possible, to the point where it's healthy for me, and I try and be understanding in their experience as I possibly can. I will never. This is something that really annoys me. I know some YouTubers have. There is one particular YouTuber that said she had depression, but she cheered herself up and got over it. But there are a lot of times where the type of depression that I have, that's as deep rooted as the one I have, and quite a lot of people I know have, it's so deep rooted that just cheering up isn't going to do anything. Getting up and doing something isn't going to do anything. The days where I'm more physical, my depression is worse because my pain is worse. On the days, it's the thing with EDS, is the more you do, the more pain you're in. And then the more pain I'm in, the worse my depression is. So, but like I said, the depression was there before the pain. Now, there is a partial reason that I know of, and another potential reason that I'm not going to go into. But just telling somebody to cheer up or think positive, it'll go away, isn't helpful at all, because it doesn't work. A lot of the time with depression, the causes of it are deep-rooted trauma, biochemical imbalance, or something else. And a lot of the time, like with me, mine's, well, we think it's biochemical, because there's a family history of it. And also the fact that it gets worse with my EDS means that it's also tied to my EDS. So just cheering up or thinking positively doesn't work on deep-rooted depression like the one I have. There are some days I literally can't get out of bed because I'm so depressed and so down, and so that I have zero energy. It's not good. Now, I know this next one here in the UK isn't an issue, but in other countries where healthcare isn't necessarily free, could be an issue, which is seek help by contacting your GP or family physician, and so they can help figure out the underlying reason behind it, which could be any of the following, and there are a lot more than I could think of. Now, this is my list. Abuse, physical, sexual, psychological, and emotional, as a child or adult. Figuring out sexuality prevalent in communities where homosexuality and bisexuality is deemed as dirty, sinful, as wrong. So say, for example, you are religious and you think you've been raised Mormon and you think you're a woman, and you were born in a boy's body but you think you're a woman. To me, you are a woman because that's what your brain's telling you. Now, that can cause depression because you have your religion telling, and everybody in your religion, which is your entire family, telling you one thing, and your body telling you the opposite, and they're at loggerheads, which isn't the best idea. Figuring out your gender, perfect example of what I've just mentioned, as well as your sexuality, whether you're bi, pan, homosexual, or anything else there may be. Body/gender dysphoria. This is common, particularly with people like myself that are a bit on the bigger side. And obviously, the gender dysphoria fits in with the transgender side. And it says relating to gender and issues with self-image. Obviously. Unhappy with home life, meaning that things are happening where there is no control, so say if you're in an abusive relationship, or you're in a house where your parents are arguing and you don't know how to feel, and you can hear the arguments even though they try and hide all that stuff. That can affect you long term as well as short term. PTSD, this is quite common in people that have been abused or raped, or people that have been in the military, or people that have been in circumstances that no human should be in, such as school shootings, terrorist attacks, anything along those lines. It's because you get PTSD. A lot of the times, along with PTSD comes depression. Family history, which is common with bipolar, depression, and schizophrenia. Like I said, with my family, me and my mum both have depression. Not sure about anybody else because there's not a lot of my family that I speak to, and I'm not sure on my biological father's side. But I do know that there are telltale signs that there are certain people that may have had depression, but not necessarily diagnosed. Bullying as a child or as an adult. Now, this is one of the reasons for me. I was bullied as a kid. I was bullied up until I was 16, up until I was secondary school. There's a couple of the bullies that I sometimes still hear from occasionally. Especially when I still lived over by my mum, because that's where I went to school. Sometimes I bump into them on the bus or something, and they actually, some of them have apologised, which is great for me, because it's like, well, thank you for actually recognising that you did something. I think the main one that bullied me, I've not seen since school, and I have no intention of seeing her. So, but I was bullied, and I was also partially bullied by my brother. But that's normal when you've got brother and sister 4 years apart. He's 4 years older, so. Medication and therapy will help people think and get better. Now, I'm on medication. I'm on, I think it's called mirtazapine, or mirtazapine, or something like that. And that seems to help with me. I do see my doctor on a regular basis, obviously, and we do keep an eye on my depression, specifically for the reason that we do know that the depression has an effect on the EDS, and the EDS has an effect on the depression, so to try and keep the two in balance. But having mental illness means that you do have to ask people for help. You don't feel like asking people for help, but you have to, otherwise you're just going to get yourself deeper and deeper into a hole, which is what happened with me. Like I said, for a lot of my history, I've never felt, like I said, there's only been a handful of times I've ever truly felt happy, and that revolves around my husband, my close friend network, and my relationship with my mum and my stepdad. Now, having mental illness isn't the best. It isn't. Living with mental illness is a pain in the ass. But there are connections that can help. Here in the UK, we have a lot of charities. There's one near here that I actually worked for as a volunteer for at one point, which is it's a company called Mind, and I did have good relationship with the people that work there. I know a couple of the people that I knew still work there, so it is one of those things that you have to try your best to keep a control and an eye on the depression, because if you don't, it can cause issues. Now, the main reason behind all this is that we need to control things. We need to control the mental illness. We need to control the symptoms, because if we don't, they could potentially get worse and more dangerous as time goes by, and lead to near incidents like I've had in the past.